Hi everybody and welcome to this month's meeting of the Divorce Support Club with me, Claire Black, and today I'm joined by Lev Boreyko at Ian Walker Family Law. Lev, would you like to do a quick introduction to yourself before we get going, just for anybody who's not met you before?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So my name is Lev Boreyko. I'm an associate in the divorce and relationships team, obviously at Ian Walker. I specialise in divorce and finances, but also deal with all aspects of family law.
Perfect, thank you very much. So we set up the Divorce Support Club a couple of years ago now, so that Ian Walker could offer their clients something a bit different to many of the other law firms out there. We understand that going through divorce is more than just a legal journey, it's also an emotional journey. And so we provide this as a way for you to get perhaps some extra tips or some different tips to help you cope perhaps with the emotional journey through your separation and divorce. And today we're going to talk about surviving the very early days of your divorce. And I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go. Do a quick introduction to myself as well. Let's just make sure that we both appear. There we are. Perfect. So I'm Claire Black. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I'm a master NLP practitioner and a former lawyer. I'm a divorced single mum of 2 teenage boys. I'm the author of a book, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence, which you can get a copy of if you wish to on my website or via Amazon. And hopefully I'll get the screen to move now. There we go. 3. No. There we go. It's all a bit out of control today. Yes, that's my book. If you'd like to get a copy, just let me know. I've actually been divorced twice now, so I've got loads of experience to bring to all of my coaching to support you through this time. The Divorce Support Club was set up in order to assist you in these ways. I call these the 7 C's to a confident, dignified divorce. So they're strategies to help you concentrate on yourself rather than on your ex, because that's where your power lies. Strategies to help you become calm, to get clarity, perhaps around the things that scare you, to focus on the things that you can control rather than those that you can't, because that's where frustration lies, to see options and choices and to make really good informed decisions, to communicate more effectively, and ultimately to create a new and vibrant life that you're excited about living. So on to today's topic. I remember my first divorce was very sudden and was a complete shock to me, a bolt from the blue. And it felt very much like my whole life was derailed. And I've heard other people compare their divorce to a train being ripped off the tracks, or a blanket that's thrown into the air and your whole life is in this blanket and suddenly everything is upended and you don't quite know where everything's going to land. And going through a separation or divorce has been compared or has been described as the second most traumatic thing that you can go through in life, next to the loss of a loved one. And it really is like that. It can be very traumatic. It can throw everything up in the air. It can affect your home life, your work life, your relationships with your family, your wider family, and your friends. So having some strategies to cope in those early days is so, so important. These are just some of the feelings that I remember having in the very early days, particularly in my first divorce. I felt very overwhelmed. I felt very betrayed, very lonely, really confused and hopeless and upset, and worried about the effect that it would have on our children. I was disappointed. I was feeling a lot of disbelief, wasn't sure who I was anymore if this role as a wife was taken away. And even in my second divorce, which was my decision, I first still felt quite a lot of these feelings. There's still that sense of loneliness, that sense of vulnerability, that sense of not really knowing what the future holds, which makes things very uncertain and can be really discombobulating. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the healing cycle. And I'm just going to move us so that we're not over it. There we go. So the healing cycle, or the grief curve, was developed by a psychologist called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the late 1960s. And she wrote about the healing cycle of bereavement to begin with. But it's now widely accepted that this cycle also applies to any kind of loss. So a divorce is absolutely a loss of a future that you once hoped for, the loss of your spouse, the loss of some parts of your family, all kinds of different losses. And so these stages, the first stage is denial. And I remember this really clearly. That stage is when you're thinking, this isn't happening. When I wake up tomorrow morning, it's all going to be okay. The car's going to be back on the drive. Everything's going to return to normal. And this is a really, really normal stage to go through. Psychologically, it's your brain protecting you from the pain. If you were exposed to all that pain all in one go, your brain wouldn't be able to cope. So it uses denial as a way to protect you from that shock. The next stage that she described is anger. And this stage comes with a lot of energy, hence the curve going up at that point. Anger is, again, completely normal, can be useful if it gives you energy, but can be destructive if you stay in this stage for perhaps too long, or you allow it to make you do things that perhaps are out of character or might damage your case further down the line. The next stage is bargaining. And this is where you might think things like, well, if only I had been funnier, sexier, a better mum, a higher earning dad, whatever it might be, then this wouldn't be happening. Or alternatively, if you're the person who's chosen to separate, then you might be thinking, okay, well, perhaps if we did this, then it would be better and we could go back. And perhaps if we went to counselling, maybe it would work. That bargaining stage, again, is really normal. And that's where you may begin to have doubts about whether you're doing the right thing. And then depression is another stage. And again, this is a really normal stage to go through when you're going through a separation or a divorce. It doesn't mean that you're going to be depressed forever. What it means is you're going through a traumatic transition from one life to the next. And so this would be characterized by, I don't want to get up in the morning. I just want to cry. I want to hide under the duvet and stay at home and eat crisps. If you are in this stage and it seems to be going on for a very long time, then there are things you can do, and perhaps go and see your GP. I have a lot of clients who take antidepressants and things for a short time to help them just get through this stage in particular. And finally, the last stage is acceptance. Now, I don't think acceptance means I'm really happy about what happened. What it means is that you accept that this has happened and you can move forward from it. You may still feel sad about it, but you can see that there is hope for a brighter future. Now, the interesting thing about this curve is that most people won't cycle through this curve in any kind of easy way. It will be messy, it will be cyclical, you will swirl around between one stage and the next stage. And that swirling can happen in a matter of minutes. 1 minute you might be feeling angry, and then the next you feel an overwhelming sadness. As you move through, it's probably worth noticing how long you stay in each of these zones for. So, and what strategies you can use to get yourself out of each of them. But be reassured, each of these stages is completely normal and everybody has their own individual journey through this. So what's happening in your brain? So there are 3 parts of your brain that we're concerned about here. The neocortex in the front of your brain is your rational thinking brain. It's where you do your logical thinking, it's where you do your problem solving. And then you have your limbic system, emotional feeling brain. And this is the part of your brain that reacts to shock, that reacts to things that take you by surprise, and it brings emotions. And those emotions are completely normal, but what they can do is overpower your rational thinking brain. So that you might find yourself doing things that perhaps are a bit out of character. You might find yourself feeling completely flooded with emotion. And then there's your reptilian brain, that's your survival, that's about breathing, that's about eating, swallowing, those kinds of things. So your limbic system, when you're in the early stages of divorce, is probably on very, very high alert. It's looking out for things that it perceives as a threat. And then it will tend to go into one of these 4 stress responses. You might go into fight mode. Now, when in a separation, fight mode might look like arguing, being aggressive, defending yourself. Or you might go into flight mode. I'm going to run away. I'm not going to face it. I'm going to hope that it all turns out okay. Or you might go into freeze mode. I'm going to do nothing. I'm just going to sit here and I'm not going to do anything at all. Or you might go into flop or fawn, this is sometimes called as well. And this is where you try and appease the other person. This is like people pleasing, if you like. So if your partner goes directly into fight mode, you may find yourself going into flop mode and trying to appease them, to manage them, to keep them happy. And these are all stress responses. They increase your adrenaline, they send emotions rushing around your body, and they can have physical effects. So you may find that you find it hard to eat. You perhaps find it hard to sleep. You find it difficult to concentrate. You break out in a sweat, your heart rate rises, all of those things, because your brain is producing more cortisol. So a lot of the strategies that I'm going to talk about today are designed to help you reduce those stress responses, which will help you bring your logical brain back on side and be able to think a little more clearly. The first one is to start chunking your time. Now, I found this so useful in the early days of my first divorce in particular. I would split my day into smaller chunks. So I'd get up in the morning and I'd split my day into the first hour. The first hour was full of, I have a shower, I get the children their breakfast, I get them ready for nursery, I take them to nursery. Then I would congratulate myself that I'd got through that chunk and I'd move on to the next chunk. You can make these chunks as small or as long as you like, but notice how over time you're able to chunk your day into larger chunks. I remember noticing for the first time that I could chunk my day into mornings, afternoons, and evenings. And now, and then later on, I could chunk my time into weeks or even months. So chunk your day and split it into smaller chunks, and notice when you get through a chunk successfully. And there are a few practical do's and don'ts. Do eat little and often. If you're finding eating difficult, use little meals, bananas, slow release energy foods, things like that will really help. Do a little bit of exercise if you can. Just get outside for a walk, spend some time out in the fresh air will do you the power of good. And then sleep. I know that a lot of people find sleep really difficult because there's lots of things swirling around your mind. So have a really calming bedtime routine. Go to bed at the same time every day. Have a hot drink perhaps before bed if that calms you. Have a bath before bed if you find that calming. Something that a lot of my clients find useful is to spend 5 minutes at the end of every day with a diary, noticing 3 things that went well today, or 3 things that I did well today, or 3 things that I'm perhaps grateful for today. That can help you to get into a calmer state of mind before you go to sleep. Once you're in bed and perhaps you wake up in the middle of the night, maybe keep a journal by the side of your bed so that if you wake up with lots of things rushing around your brain, you can write them down. Write them down so that you know you're not going to forget them, so that they're out of your head and onto the page. And that can really help a lot of people. And then breathing strategies. I'm going to talk a little bit later about some breathing strategies, but one that really helped me when I was finding it really difficult to sleep was to lie really comfortably in bed and then slowly tense up my muscles. So tense up the muscles in your feet, hold for 5 and relax. Tense the muscles in your legs for 5 and relax. And gradually work up through your body. And while you're doing that, concentrate on your breathing. So breathing in and out really slowly, breathing in and out. And I used to find it helpful to imagine on my out breaths that I was breathing out a beautiful soft mist that was designed to keep me warm. Mine was green, yours might be any colour you want, whatever colour works for you. But use that breathing, and I found that quite often by the time I'd got to scrunching up my face, I was actually asleep. So give those things a go. Some things to avoid: caffeine. Certainly avoid caffeine in the evening because it won't help you sleep at all. Too much alcohol as well, or working too hard, working 24/7, or keeping so busy that you become exhausted. Drugs, partying too hard, all of those things are coping strategies that I've seen people use, but in the long run, all they do really is lead you to feeling exhausted and perhaps into burnout. So avoid those things as much as you can. And then mindfulness. Now you hear a lot about mindfulness these days. So this is just a really quick strategy that you can use to bring yourself back to the present moment. This is really useful in those moments where perhaps you are thinking at 1,000,000 miles an hour about all the terrible things that might happen and all the things that are really scaring you about what your divorce might look like and what your future might look like. This will bring you back to now. So if you sit comfortably and just look around the room, find 5 things that you can see. Find 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And that will bring you back into the moment. And I talked already a little bit about breathing, but a couple of other breathing strategies that you can use. And these are great also to teach your children if your children are struggling with what's happening. The first one is to use your hand. So using your hand and your other finger. So breathe in as you bring your finger slowly up. Breathe out as it goes down. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And you can do that as many times as you need to bring calm. What that does is bring oxygen back into your brain, and oxygen will help to calm your emotional brain that's reacting to the threat at the moment. Another really good one is what I call your breath is more powerful than your thoughts. So this is, and we can do this now. So breathe in and count to 5. Hold for 2 and breathe out and count to 7. And again, breathe in and count to 5. Hold for 2 and breathe out while you count to 7. Now, I could see Lev doing that, so hopefully that has helped you to feel a bit calmer. I don't know if you were stressed anyway, but it can really help to slow your heart rate down, bring that oxygen back to your brain. And the wonderful thing about your breath is that it's always, always with you. It costs nothing. It's always with you, and you can use these strategies wherever you are. So if you are even in a work meeting or you're driving your car, you can do this sort of breathing in and out just to bring some calm in the moment. And the reason I've called it your breath is more powerful than your thoughts is because when you count, you can't think at the same time. So if you are finding yourself with lots and lots of swirling thoughts, swirling questions, that strategy of counting while you breathe will help to stop those swirling thoughts in your mind and will overpower those thoughts. Remind yourself every day of who you are. So this is a set of mantras that I came up with when I was going through my first divorce. So I'm Claire. I'm kind and loyal. I'm a good friend. I'm funny and friendly. I deserve to be happy. I can take care of me, and this too shall pass. Now, I found it really difficult at that point in time to be able to say some of those things about myself because my husband had left very suddenly. I didn't feel that I was a particularly good person at that time, and I wondered about my own worthiness. So what I did was I messaged 4 or 5 of my close friends, and I asked them to let me know what qualities they liked in me and what they admired in me and what made them want me as their friend. And these were the words that they came up with: that I was kind and loyal and a good friend and funny and friendly. And they also gave me messages like I deserved to be happy and that this would end one day and that I could take care of myself and that they would help me do that. So I took their words and I turned them into these affirmations. And then I stuck this up. This stayed on my mirror for about 4 years post-divorce. And I read it every single morning and every single evening. And over time, it sunk in. And I believe those things about myself now. So ask yourself, what are my good qualities? Who am I? What are the things that I love about myself? And if you find that hard, then message a couple of your really good friends, maybe 3 or 4 of your really good friends, and just ask them what they would do, what words they would use to describe you, because it's really important to remind yourself who you are right now. And then this is something that I use a lot with my clients. So my emotions wheel. Sometimes it can be really difficult to identify what it is that you're feeling as you go through a separation. You might know that you feel perhaps sad, but you're not quite sure what underlies that, or you know that you feel angry and you're not quite sure what's underneath that. I always think anger is a bit like an iceberg. Anger is what you see on the surface, and underneath it, there are all sorts of other feelings going on. Paul McKenna describes feelings or emotions as being like visitors. So they knock on your door, and if you don't let them in, then they knock louder, they knock louder, and they knock louder, and finally they burst through. So I like to think of feelings as visitors that I can choose to let in. I can identify them, and I can go, hi there, Mr. I don't know, Mr. Jealous or Mrs. Furious. I'm going to let you in. I'm going to let you in for a cup of tea, or I'm going to let you in for a meal, and then I'm going to show you the door again. It can really help to identify what those feelings are. Once you can identify your feelings, then you can acknowledge them, and you can start to accept them, and you can start to move beyond them. Oh, there we go. And a strategy that I use a lot with clients around feelings is to surf those feelings. So sometimes you get an emotion rising and you know it's coming. So I always say, think of yourself a bit like a surfer. You can surf those feelings, ride that wave. So imagine yourself like a surfer paddling out to sea, and you can see this wave of feeling coming towards you. You can turn your board and ride that wave. Now you could try to go through it or around it or under it, but that will probably result in you being knocked off your board. If, however, you surf those feelings and you allow yourself to feel them in a safe way, of course, then you will always land on the beach, because feelings are always transitory. They never last forever. They come and they go, and some of the waves will be higher and more powerful than others. And over time, if you start to notice whether it was a 10 out of 10 wave or a 5 out of 10 wave, you may notice the feelings are getting smaller and smaller over time. And that's really worth noticing. And then remember, when you land on the shore, you can sit on the shore, you can be safe on the beach, and you can have the sun warm your back. And then you can do some breathing, and you can start to think, okay, what can I do next? Which leads me on to what I can and can't control. And this is really fundamental to everything that I do, and was massively fundamental to my recovery in my first divorce in particular. So I can only control myself. We can all only control our own thoughts, our own actions, feelings, reactions, decisions, body language. We can't control the other person's. So ask yourself questions like, what can I control here? What things are within my power to do something about? One of the things that a lot of my clients say is that they find themselves spending a lot of time wishing their ex would be different, or wishing their ex would simply understand something. And that takes you right into this orange zone here of frustration on the outside, where you're trying to be in control of someone else's feelings. And that's only ever going to lead you towards frustration and possibly feeling angry as well. So start to really notice what you can and can't control, and shift your focus onto those things that you can. And in the early days of any divorce, there are some very simple things that you can perhaps do and things that you can control. So you can control, for example, what you watch on the television. You don't need to watch those heavy dramas or those difficult programs. You can control what music you listen to as well. So perhaps don't listen to your wedding song or those sad love songs. Perhaps listen to something that helps you to feel a little bit more upbeat, or something that helps you feel empowered. You can also control what you look at on social media, and this is something that comes up time and time again. Looking at your ex's activity on social media is like torturing yourself or picking a scab. So I always advise my clients to come off Facebook. It can also damage your case if you put things on Facebook in anger that later come back to haunt you, perhaps if your case ends up being high conflict. So you don't need to see what your ex is up to anymore. You don't need to see who they're spending time with. So bring yourself off, and also ask your friends not to tell you stuff as well. You don't need to know these things anymore, because it takes you down a really unhealthy path. And you can control the questions you ask in your head. So a couple of really good questions to ask yourself might be, what would be the most helpful thing I could do for myself today? Or who could I ask for support with this? Or what made me feel better last week, and what would I enjoy? How could I find a little bit of joy in today? You can also control who you spend time with. So you can choose which friends you tell everything to. You can choose who you listen to. You can choose whether you spend time with your radiator friends or your drains, those people who perhaps you come away feeling depleted from. They're people that you don't need to be spending time with right now. And you can also control what you wear. So dress for how you want to feel is my top tip. If you dress for how you actually feel on a day when you feel really down, it will keep you feeling down. So, you know, putting on your mankiest tracksuit or the clothes you wore yesterday is not going to help you to feel better. So maybe just add a splash of colour. Buy something new that you haven't had before. Perhaps buy a new top that is in a lovely colour that really suits you. One of the things that I did early on in my first divorce was go and get my hair cut. So we had small children and my hair had grown really long and I really didn't like it, but I thought I don't have time to go and get a haircut. But once I was separated and my husband was spending some time with the children, I booked a haircut and I went and had all my hair chopped off, and that made me feel so much better. So do things differently and you can absolutely control those small things. Lean on your support network. Lean on those people who are offering you support and be really clear with them what it is that you need. So if you need a cup of tea, if you need a hug, if you need somebody perhaps to babysit the children for a while, whatever it is you need, identify which friends you have who fit each category. So I had a friend who, after I dropped my eldest son off at nursery, I could drop into her because she lived next door and she would give me breakfast. That meant I ate at least once in a day in those early days. So lean on your support network and try not to feel like you're a burden. I hear this so often, but you need support right now. So lean on your support network, use those people around you, and make sure that you communicate with them what it is that you need. And then set your sails. This one I found really, really helpful, particularly in my second divorce, to set my sails, to know where I was trying to get to, and to steer my own ship steadily through whatever the weather. So when you're going through a separation, sometimes if you compare it to being on a sea, sometimes that sea will be really choppy, sometimes it will be very rough. And if you set your sails and you focus on you and steering your own ship steadily through, whatever the weather, that will really hold you in good stead. So be really clear about where you want to get to. Perhaps have a vision for where you want your relationship with your ex-partner to look like in the future, but set your sails. One mantra that really helped me in the early days along these lines was dignity at all times. And I used to imagine I had it tattooed across my head. Whenever I had to see my ex-husband, I imagined myself being dignified. I would hold my shoulders high. I would wear clothes that helped me to feel dignified. And that helped me to steer my own ship steadily through. And then what do you love doing? So these are just some of the things that I love doing. Is my kids up here. I love spending time with them. They're 18 and 16 now. They were 3 and 1 at the time that I got divorced the first time. I love cycling. I love skiing. I love where I live and I love going to the beach and swimming in the sea. And I love spending time with my friends and also my puppy. So make a little list of all the things that you love doing and try and find a little bit of joy in every single day. Do something that's just for you every day, something that you love, something that you enjoy. Obviously, you can't go skiing every day if you live in the UK, but you can imagine the feeling. So I would associate myself into the feeling that I have when I ski. So imagine yourself doing the thing that you love, feeling that feeling. I can feel the feeling of freedom. I can feel the feeling of the wind in my hair, and I can take myself there in my mind. So use that as well. And then lastly, this was some really good advice that I got very early on, was to smile. I didn't really feel like smiling at all at the time. But my friend said to me, Claire, you need to plaster on a smile. Every morning, plaster on a smile, whether you want to or not. Now, I didn't know psychologically at the time what that did. But when you smile, there's research now to show that when you smile, it releases endorphins. And endorphins are those feel-good hormones that will help you to feel just a little bit better. And I can still remember very, very clearly the first time when I put that smile on, not because I had to, but because I actually wanted to. And I actually felt like smiling. So that was a big day for me. So smile, plaster on that smile. And when you smile at people, they will smile back at you as well. So you'll get some feel good endorphins as well from that too. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, if I can make my mouse work. There we go. and come back to the meeting. There we go. So those are just some really simple strategies that you can use right from the get-go, when you perhaps hear the news or you are breaking the news to your partner that you want a separation. Those early days are all about taking back control where you can, helping yourself to feel just that little bit better, and using the support networks that you have. Now, I know, Lev, you've probably got some things that you want to share in terms of the things to do legally right at the start. And I know that some of my clients often don't really, the whole divorce thing is totally alien. It's a scary thing to go into. So would you be able to explain just very briefly what the system looks like, and how it works?
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. So very recently in April of this year, we've had a new divorce law come in. So the previous divorce law was a fault-based divorce system, and as of April this year, it is a non-fault divorce system. What that means is that you no longer have to attribute a reason or blame as to why you are getting divorced. The only legal criteria is a confirmation that you feel as an applicant that your marriages are truly broken down. The additional element that has been brought in now to try to promote amicable divorces, because the law appreciates that a divorce and resolution of finances in due course doesn't have to be a fight. So the additional provision that has been brought in is that you can apply for divorce as two applicants, so both individuals can apply for that. The application process itself, it is done online. So the entire process is now electronic from start to finish. For most individuals, the divorce itself will take around 6 to 9 months. Now, I occasionally have individuals come to me and say, well, I've gone online and seen adverts for quickie divorce, and I think that they are on the rise. There is no such thing as a quickie divorce. There are statutory guidelines in terms of certain wait periods. So I think if companies are promising you that they can do it in a couple of weeks, it's simply not a viable option. I think the other element to consider, and I think all three elements they're linked together, but they're not tied together, is the resolution of finances. So when we look at divorce and resolution of finances, the two elements are linked, and most people think of them as one. But obviously in reality, they're not. You can be divorced, meaning you are free to go and remarry in the future, but you will be financially tied to your spouse until there is a financial order which gives you that break. Okay. It's obviously the children, if you do have any, also come into the mix, because the presence of children is relevant when we look at resolving finances, for example. But it's not directly tied, insofar as, for example, I'll have clients who will come to me and they want to just resolve the finances because they'd like to think that the child arrangements will fall into place thereafter. Other individuals would like to do it all together, and there is no right or wrong approach. It's just what that individual client wants to do. It's ultimately, a divorce process is a very personal endeavor that a person takes on. So it's what we try to do at Ian Walker is tailor it around what you want and how you want to proceed.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So I've often had clients come in and they're really scared of what the divorce process looks like. And so what you've just said there are three strands, aren't there? There's the dissolution, the paperwork, and then there's the finances, and then there's the children. And every divorce is totally and utterly different, and very dependent on the facts and so on in each case.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I would encourage people to a certain degree is to concentrate on kind of what you want to achieve, because there is a lot of individuals out there, and a lot of people I speak with that will say to me, well, my friend went through a divorce, or my brother or my cousin or my uncle, and they achieved X. So it is it's a very personal element, and I think when people speak to other individuals in relation to what they achieved, they may not appreciate the other factors that have been considered in that given case. So it's not a mathematical calculation to a certain degree. So, and it is tailored to that individual.
Yes, that's really interesting. Much like a coaching, I suppose, it's, every client is totally different and they all have very different concerns. And I think there is a danger, if you have a friend, for example, I've seen this happen, you have a friend who went through a very acrimonious divorce and says, well, divorce is always like this and you have to get, a really aggressive lawyer on your side and so on and so forth. Just watch out for those things. That's the kind of, if I were you, brigade, I like to them. The people who say, well, if I were you, I would do this, or this is what happened in my divorce, so you ought to do the same. No, go and take some individual, independent, impartial advice on your situation. Which actually leads me on to fear, because one of the other things that I find often is that right at the beginning of the process, people are really afraid. They're afraid perhaps of what the future looks like. They're afraid of their financial position. They're afraid of losing their children, perhaps, or they're afraid of how other people will view them. They're afraid of being judged. All sorts of fears arise in this process. And I remember really clearly going to see my solicitor for the first time in my first divorce, and her saying to me, I think you need to take some time to get yourself in the emotionally stronger place for you to be able to take some of this on and to be able to deal with it. And that was really good advice. Sometimes going straight to issuing legal proceedings and going down that legal route it's not always the right thing to do straight away, depending on your circumstances. I guess it's another example of how every situation is different. But if you're really struggling, then maybe in your support network, you need somebody like a counsellor or a coach to help you get emotionally ready for the process before you enter into it. But I quite often use a particular strategy with clients around fear and overwhelm, because it's the overwhelm that often results from that fear. So we will get a big piece of A3 paper and brain dump everything that the client is scared about or afraid of onto that piece of paper in a big kind of splurge in separate little bubbles. And then we'll look at each of those bubbles and go through some of the questions that I raised earlier. So the first question would be, is this within my power to do anything about? Is it in my control? And anything that's not in your control on that list, we put a line through, because there's nothing you can do about that. The second question is there somebody that could help me with this? So there might be aspects on there that you need some help with. Perhaps you need a bit of legal advice. Perhaps you need some financial advice to know what a likely settlement might look like, for example. Perhaps you're worried about how your children will cope, and you've got a friend who's managed it really well, and you might be able to go and talk to them about how they did that. And then the next question would be, what one or two small steps can I take in relation to this to make it just that little bit better and to move forward on this today? Because quite often people try and get to the top of the staircase quickly, and actually this is something that maybe you need to take step by step. And what's the next small step that I can take to get this under control? And that sometimes helps to deal with those feelings of overwhelm, to get clarity on what those little steps might be. So yeah, that's a strategy that I just use sometimes in relation to those fears and so on. Get clarity, get information, work out what you can control, who you need help from, and then what one or two small steps you can take right now to make it just that little bit better. Is there any other, or are there any other tips and strategies that you offer your clients, Lev, when they first come to see you?
Yes, I think this is where kind of you come in, Claire, and I think a lot of clients that I see, especially in the early stages, at the separation stage, I think they need a mixture of legal advice and support, and for a lot of people, the two can sometimes be one, insofar as they treat solicitors and lawyers as a support network, as well as seeking legal advice, and obviously that can be quite costly. So obviously, what I advise my clients from the outset is, invest in a little bit of coaching and counseling, because ultimately, not only will that help you in an emotional state, but it will also give you clarity of mind in terms of where we're going. In terms of the fears, from more of a legal perspective, I think what I would say is there is, usually speaking, a remedy for a lot of the fears. I'll give you, example. I have people coming to me that say, my husband or wife is the main earner. I don't know what we're going to do now because I'm going to be without money. Okay, so that there is a remedy for that in financial side of things. Another example is, I don't think my wife or my husband's are going to allow me to see the children as often or when I'd like to see them. There is a remedy for that. So just because you don't, if you're fearful of something, generally speaking, there is a remedy for that. So if that alleviates at least a little bit of anxiety and fear, I guess a little bit of legal advice from an early stage would be very beneficial. What you choose to do with that advice is ultimately down to the client, but I do advise most people that to take a little bit of advice so at least they know where they're going and what's available.
Yes, absolutely. And something that I've worked quite a lot with clients on is that fear of not being with their children all the time. And so quite often I will sit down with them and we'll look at the proposed, let's say there's a proposed rota that, or routine that's being suggested, and we'll put it onto a calendar and see what it actually looks like. And then we'll talk about what you could do in the time that you've now got that you couldn't do if your children were with you. So it's about reframing the time that your children are with your ex-partner to make it something that becomes precious to you. And that can be really quite a powerful thing. I remember working with a client who was really worried because her young son, who was about 5, was going to spend Christmas with his dad for the first time. She had had him for Christmas the year before, and it was his dad's turn this year. And she was really, really worried about it. But when I asked her what she could do while he wasn't with her, and that she couldn't do if he was with her, she said, well, I've always wanted to join the Boxing Day ride along the beach. She was a big horse rider. So she booked it. And on Boxing Day, she went and she did this amazing ride. And she'd also been invited to some friends for lunch on Christmas Day. So it turned out that actually she had a really lovely couple of days. And then when her son came home, she made the decision that they would then have Christmas then. So she invited her parents to stay. There was her and her son, and they did Father Christmas all over again. They had turkey, they had stuffing, they had all the trimmings that you have, and they just had Christmas on a different day. So there are always ways, I think, to reframe what's happening to you to make it so that it's a bit more comfortable. And I know that's challenging to do, but it is possible, and it does make your life happier in the long run. So I think hopefully today we've given you all some suggestions as to how you can handle those very early days. As always, if you would like to contact either Lev or I outside of the DSC, please feel free to do that, and we can have a chat with you or give you an idea of our services and how we can help you. And we will see everybody again at the next DSC in November, when we're actually going to be talking about Christmas, I think, and reframing Christmas. So we will email out the dates and so on for that so that you can join us then. And we will look forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much for coming, everybody.